Let's have a look at a way of setting up some studio lighting that you can use in every scene when you're modeling objects. You can see this object right now really looks pretty terrible. Reflections are terrible, the metals look terrible, the textures look terrible, and they shouldn't because they're actually done reasonably well. Problem is, without lighting and without something to reflect, everything's going to look terrible. So we need to get something going and start with some lighting to be able to accentuate that. So I'm doing lighting long before I'm doing texturing so that my texturing makes sense. First off, we want to add in an HDRI. So I hit 8 to open that up, or you can go to rendering and environment panel. And we want to get an HDRI in here. So I've got one set up. I'm using the OSL HDRI environment with the Arnold renderer, and I'm just going to take the output and drop it in there. Now what I've picked is some nice studio lighting. That studio lighting HDRI was downloaded from HDRI Haven or Polyhaven. I want to thank those guys, fantastic, and it's great that you share the stuff for free. You know, my students use it all the time and learn a lot by using that information that you've got there. Now, that's already helped. Let's just make sure that my lighting is illuminate with scene lights, and you can see it looks just way better right away. It just looks significantly better than it did. We've got reflections coming off of these, this environment. We've got color coming off the environment, and it just makes it look better. So even just doing that will get you started modeling a lot better. But I really like having some proper lights in there that are giving me a lighting solution. So with that being said, let's create some lights. So one of the ways I work is, I'm just going to hit Alt-W here, is that I set up my viewports so that I have 3 up, 2 at the top. And this top one is going to be the high quality viewport. It's on scene lights. And if we look at the active viewport settings, which if you can just right click on the little filter here that I've got turned on to hide other non-rendering objects. Under settings, we can then play around with some of the settings for that. I like progressive fade time to be turned up so that it fades in a little slower and doesn't flash as much. This viewport I like to set up a little bit differently. Same thing, progressive fade time, like set to 10 or something. But I turn on auto display selected lights. You'll notice that doesn't look very good. And what this is going to do is it's turning off the background lighting, but it is going to display only the lights that I have selected so that I can see what each light is doing and how it's affecting this end result. And then down here, I've got the, just a perspective viewport that I can work with. And again, I can have the scene lights turned on, but I can now move around in here and see results up top. So this is a great way to work. So when we look at the HDRI, we can see that there is a big bright window here. And so let's mimic that a little bit with a light. So create lights and change it to Arnold, since I'm using the Arnold renderer. And I'm going to go in and then drag in a new light and drop that right to the middle and move that up. Now this light, it's not by default, it's set to a distant. You could do it as a window again. You could do it as a big panel light, quad light. But these I tend to just go with a big directional light, distant. The lighting is coming direct. It's like the sun hitting us. I'm going to right click and say select target and just move the target up into the middle of my model where it's going to be. Now with this, we want to set this up and get it looking and like it's doing something. So you can see that if I deselect it, you can see up here it's no longer showing that given light. So this one's only showing this one light. Now we should also name this light. And this is going to be our key light. And we're going to want some sort of color in it. So the way I add color is I go and steal it out of the HDRI possibly, to get started. So you can open up the color picker and then go to the eyedropper and you can go and pick some colors and try and find a color that maybe is coming out of that is, looks nice, looks like the kind of light that's coming out of your HDRI. I like to take the exposure control down to 0. I find it it gives me a better result of the render to the viewport. And then we can play with the amount of light. So you can see here that the lighting is definitely different because it's only this light that we're playing with right now. Okay. Samples I tend to set to 2 so that it renders a little bit better. You know, it's a little higher quality when it renders. And then we can move on to the next light. So I'm going to take this light and I'm just going to copy it to the other side. And this is going to become a backlight, or you could call it a rim light. I'm going to move it down and grab the target and move it up. And maybe just move it back along the local a little bit. But this one I'll tend to turn on to a quad light. And so I can play with those quad settings as to how big that background's going to be. Now I can also, you know, pick some sort of color for that is going to help, you know, out of my scene that I think is going to be complementary. If there's maybe those browns back there or something, but you don't want it to be very saturated, okay? And you want to pull the saturation down on it. And then once again, exposure down to 0, and I can start dialing that in. So now you can really see here what is changing on that light. What is it really affecting when you look at this viewport here? So that is a great way of just being able to understand what that light is achieving for you and whether it's doing something really good. Now, once again, we need to sort of add something else to the scene, and that is going to be a ground. Right now, there's no cast shadows. It just looks like it's floating. And so you'll also notice that my HDRI looks like on the ground, and yours may not. So what I've done in my HDRI settings is I turned on ground projection and then played with the height of the tripod. Now you'll see the background doing this, you know, but it doesn't matter because why would I have a backpack in the middle of a kitchen? I don't want to render all this. It just doesn't look good. So in my opinion, so what I do is I use a custom background color. And again, I use the color picker to go and pick something off the background. So if you open up that swatch and then turn off the custom background, you can now go around and pick some color again. And again, we want it desaturated. We don't want it to, you know, bother us sort of thing. And, you know, maybe its brightness or whatever is going to be, you know, a little bit subtle or, you know, close to the overall lighting that we've got in our scene so that it kind of looks good. And again, play with your, you know, if you want your ground projection back on, you can see it and it's on the ground, but we don't have any shadows. So let's go and add a big plane. I'm just going to make sure that is centered at 0, 0, 0. And I'm going to take the length. I'm going to say copy controller, go to the width, paste instance. So when I change one, it changes the other. And I can make a big plane, ground plane. Now we're going to use a matte shadow material. So that's under materials, general matte shadow material right here. And I'm going to apply that by hitting A to the selected object. And now you can see I've got you know, no ground showing. It shows through to whatever the background is, but it casts a shadow. So therefore, if I go and turn off the use background, it looks like it's actually casting a shadow onto the floor of the HDRI. So now that we have that, we want to be able to adjust the lighting around the room. We want to see what this looks like from all angles. And that can, you know, really help you because you don't know how it's going to be seen in the final renders. I'm just going to create a circle. I'm going to, again, zero it out to the center world space, maybe move it up just a little bit. And I'm going to call this scene rotate. I'm going to select my lights, and if you click on the target line, you'll actually pick both the target and the light and the target for it. Same with the camera. I'm going to go to the linking and link them down to this object. So now when I take this object and rotate it, you can see I'm rotating the lighting around the object, and I can see how the light changes over the object. Now, if you are doing this, you're going to find that the background lighting isn't actually rotating. So you can see that as I rotate this object, It's not rotating the background around with it. And really we want that too, because we want the lighting of the background to rotate with the lights. So to the motion panel, open up and grab the Z rotation controller, and I'm just going to say copy controller. Head back over to my HDRI, and in the rotation that it controls the rotation of it, I'm going to right click on that, and I'm going to say we're going to paste the instance for that controller. So problem is, you're going to find that doesn't work very well. So you can see that when I rotate the lights, the scene is rotating very slowly. Well, that's because the rotation coming out of the circle is in radians, and the rotation of the background is in degrees. So 1 radian is 6.24, in other words, 2 pi, okay? So let's do that again. Let's right click on that, and this time, well, I'll probably have to go back and get it. You know what I'll do is I'll reset this by reset to default. I'll grab this again, and I'll say copy controller, and I'll paste wire here for the Z. It brings up the wire parameter, so I want it to the rotation to control this. And then we're going to use a rad to deg command in front of the rotation. Hit apply, and now when we rotate, you can see they're rotating 1 to 1. So what's nice about that is that now the background is actually rotating with the scene, and it's rotating around with it. And so we're going to get those lighting changes. You know, here it doesn't look like it's rotating. We're always looking into the same corner, but the lighting changes on that background are now going to affect it. So we can go back and say use custom background, and now the light is changing on that background as well. One more thing we can do to help affect things would be to actually have lots of different HDRIs at our disposal. Now we can just go in here and keep swapping them out, but I've used a 1 of n file name. So under OSL switchers, 1 of n file name, and I've loaded a bunch of different HDRIs here. And if I drag and drop that into the into the input for file name, what I can do is I can then simply skip through them. So if you want to see that happen again, I'm just going to turn off the use custom background, and we can simply go in and change those, and we'll get completely different lighting results from those. Now, you might want to be able to rotate the each HDRI separately from the lights. You'll notice I can't do that. No matter what, it goes back to 0. It's because it's being controlled by the rotation of this circle. So let's do something kind of cool. I'm just going to right click. I'm going to go down and open Dope Sheet, and I can, usually what I do is I dock this actually on top of here again. So I've got this track editor in here. We're going to go into scene materials, and there's that rotation track that's being driven. So if I showed the controllers in here, controller types, you'll see that it is a float wire. So that's the wire that's controlling it, and that's why I can't rotate it here. I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to say assign controller, and I'm going to add a float list. And now it's got this, list controller on here. And if I open that, double click on the float list, I can go ahead and append it. Now it puts in a Bezier float and it makes it active. You can see it's active here. With that active there, okay, this new controller being shown in here, and I'll turn this filter off for animated tracks so you can see it. There it is there. There's the float wire. There's the Bezier controller. Well, guess what? Now I can actually go in and I can override it because it's an additive feature. So this is driving the rotation of it from the circle down here. So it's rotating it, but I can now also offset it to be able to align it to the lights. Pretty handy little feature. In the end, what you can do is you can save this scene without your asset and be able to load this scene up first and then start modeling inside here, and you have all your lighting set up and you've got everything working for you.